Good afternoon. We'll get started a couple minutes early if that's okay. Can everyone hear me? Okay. My name is Jason Carter. I'm the chairman of the Board of Trustees at the Carter Center, and I'm the leader of this Carter Center observation mission here in Guyana. I'm joined by Marita Tabatadze and Jason Calder. Jason is our country director, well known here in Guyana. Marita is our legal analyst who has done a remarkable job for us over this time, understanding and continuing to understand the Guyanese law that governs these proceedings. At the outset, let me say that Guyana should be very proud of its elections and of its democracy. Guyana is a vibrant democracy. And yes, there are some persistent issues that have undermined trust between the parties at different times, and that lack of trust is very important. But Guyana is a robust democracy, and the people of Guyana truly embrace their democratic values. They are eager to participate and to express themselves in rallies, to express themselves in impassioned debates, and also to cherish the peaceful conduct of the election, both in the pre-election period and on election day. And as we all know, this democracy in Guyana is hard won, and therefore more. Because of its newfound wealth, Guyana sort of wakes up to find out that the eyes of the world are watching it. The Carter Center's observers had observers from 21 separate countries. The EU, the OAS, and others added dozens of additional countries. And it's not just the international observers that are here observing the election. But the world is watching because Guyana has a real opportunity to be a world leader and an example for the world of a vibrant democracy that is built on freedom and that is based on equal and wide access to political power. Guyana will soon be a rich country. And the question is whether it will be a rich country full of poor people or whether it will be a rich country that is based on a democracy that does not leave people out of the system and use that democratic heritage to ensure that the wealth meets the needs of the people and that the government is accountable to those same people in a real, vibrant democracy. And Guyana has what it takes to do this today. So we believe that the stakes are high, not just for the people of Guyana, but for democracy globally. This is an important moment, and this is an important place. And that's why we have called for years on Guyana's leaders in this new government and the new parliament, whoever they may be, to continue the crucial discussions around constitutional reform, to implement campaign finance reform, to ensure, it is especially important, equal access to public information about the contracts that are occurring, about the things that affect people in their daily lives. And this is a crucial issue between elections. Elections are really a report card on a democracy. They are not the democracy itself. There's so much that occurs between elections that will be crucially important. And we also call on them to continue to implement the laws that they have that surround and support their electoral process. With respect to Election Day itself and to the Carter Center's observations, we sent about 50 observers to 234 polling stations in all 10 electoral districts. We observed the tabulation in all 17 tabulation centers. I myself went to 3 of those tabulation centers, and as we all know, they're continuing to complete that tabulation process, and we will continue to monitor that process for the next several days and weeks as the electoral process completes. Across the country, our observers on Election Day found that polling staff, party agents, GCOM conducted themselves well and with professionalism. We did not see any significant irregularities of any kind. And we also monitor with a sophisticated way social media. And the social media reports also indicated that from a procedural standpoint, the process of this election was well conducted. There was an enormous number of positive social media posts. The pre-election period is another comment that we've made, and in that pre-election statement you saw some weeks ago that the Carter Center called out some various aspects of that process. Of course, the pre-election period and the campaigning period was robust. It was heated at times, but it was also peaceful. And it was also reflective of people having real rights to express themselves. That original August 19th report did talk about the persistent issues, including the size of the voter list, the lack of a level playing field for some aspects of the campaign, and the right to political participation. All of this will be the subject of a comprehensive report. Today, as you leave here, you will receive our preliminary report that details a number of these issues, and then over the next couple months, we will produce a final report that has detailed recommendations and also other suggestions for how the government and the people of Guyana can proceed to address some of these issues. Let me say this before we open it up for questions. I mentioned that we monitored social media. We are aware that there was an issue that has been raised with respect to the ability of citizens from other Commonwealth nations to vote in Guyana. And we will note two things. Number one, Guyana has robust election laws in place. And if someone has broken those laws, Guyana has the resources to ensure that they are doing what they need to do to ensure that those laws are complied with. We will note one other thing. Based on our legal analysis, the right for Commonwealth citizens from other countries to vote has been a part of Guyana since the 1966 Constitution. So these are not new issues, but there are issues, for example, that this new parliament, this new government may want to take up. And if so, they can go through those processes and deal with them. With that, I'm happy to take questions on any aspects of this, and if I can't answer them, again, we have our legal analyst here and our country director, Jason Calder. So if there's questions, please now be the time. And we have a microphone here so that everyone can hear you. Yes. Oh, let's go here and then there.
Okay.
You and then there.
Okay. Hello, Patrick Ford, AFP. What do you think of the delay to get the results?
So we've been observing the tabulation process. It is a cumbersome process that takes time. It is also one, again, we've been in every single tabulation center. 97% of the reports that we've received regarding tabulation recorded that tabulation was being conducted in accordance with was good, and all of them said that they were doing it in accordance with the law. So that process is cumbersome, but it is ongoing, it is transparent, and when it's complete, I think people will have trust in the results. We may, in the coming weeks and in the coming months, with our final report, provide some recommendations based on international standards for streamlining that process. But again, this is the process that the Guyanan law calls for, and it's one that we've been able to observe transparently that appears to be proceeding as it is supposed to proceed. And then down here, we'll get to everybody.
Good afternoon, Mr. Carter. Antonio Day from HAP Nightly News. You said that you have not noticed any irregularities, but notably, there have been reports where persons, they would have publicized voting, although phones were not allowed in the polling booth. What is your response to such?
Sure. You'll see a number of reports of all different kinds of things, right? No election is going to be perfect in every detail. Right? The question is whether those details add up to something, or whether those details are things that can be isolated instances where folks are the polling screen is turned in the wrong direction. Those issues are important. It's important to follow the rules, but the question that we ask is, are these the types of things that rise to the level of a significant problem? And we found that there were no significant irregularities in the things that we've observed. That's how I would answer that question. And of course, you'll be able to find folks that had an issue here and there, and that happens in every election, in every country, in every democracy in the world. And so we want to be careful of those, and those are crucially important to the individual who is involved. And we have to ensure that those individuals have the ability to ensure that their vote is counted, to ensure that their vote is properly cast, and that the law is followed. So each of those things we have to do correctly, and they are important. The question is, do they become systematically significant? And that is what we have not seen.
And secondly, what are your concerns about political parties who are making premature disclosure, although the statutory body, the Guyana Elections Commission, has not made an official declaration of the results?
Sure. So I think we and have heard from a number of political parties and out in the news that we have copies, as you know, that have been posted of the statements of polls, right? There is an enormous amount of transparency associated with this current situation that we are in. So folks can say and do on some level what they will, but everyone understands that the way that they calculate seats in the parliament is a very complicated process, and the only official result is the one that is announced from GCOM. And so we would encourage everyone to wait until the official result has been announced, and again, wait the potential for recounts and other aspects of the electoral process to be complete before you would understand and know for sure who the ultimate results of the election.
DeLon Goring, DeLon's Creative Media Enterprise. Sir, you would have made a number of recommendations. The Carter Center would have made a number of recommendations regarding the legitimacy and the accuracy of the elections in Ghana. Could you care to share with us what are some of the procedures that you think that have been adhered to? And in future, is there any more recommendations that you would have made, but based on those recommendations, how much of recommendations do you think would have been adhered to by the powers that be?
So the purpose of an international observation group is to provide eyes and ears. And then we can make recommendations that's based on what we see and based on international standards. But it's up to the people of Guyana and to the powers that be, as you say, to decide which of those recommendations they take. And so we can urge, but ultimately the question is, what does Guyana decide they want to undertake? And so you have seen significant changes in the election process, especially the tabulation process from 2020. You will see some other recommendations that we've been making for years. For example, there is a mechanism now for selecting the GCOM commissioners. They've called that the Carter formula. We have been against the Carter formula for years, making these recommendations. And so there are a number of ways that you can look at international best practices and understand how that election commission itself can be more independent and less partisan. And it can still be a Guyanese solution. And that's really what it requires, is a Guyanese solution. But as we make those recommendations, some are taken, some are not. And we continue to be engaged in this place and in these discussions throughout the times between elections. And so we are able to lend our voice, but ultimately the question is, what is the Guyanese solution to these problems? So, Jason, do you want to add anything to that?
Good afternoon, Khadija Bass, Starbreak News. Just for the record, I understand that you said that, most of my questions, the answers would be in the report, but just for the record, is it the position of the Carter Center that there was not a level playing field for all of the parties, specifically as it relates to the Win party being denied ear access? And secondly, is it also the position of the Carter Center that, based on the reports from the long-term observers, that the state assets were used in campaigning efforts by the governing party?
So the Carter Center issued a report on August 19th, a preliminary statement. And in it, we did call out those issues that there are aspects of the campaigning process that are not a level playing field. The question for Guyana is how to address those issues. For example, the question of how any incumbent is able to use the power of that incumbency to gain electoral benefit, right? This is an issue in every democracy. And the key for Guyana is to decide how they want to regulate that process. What restrictions do they want to put on the campaign period or on other aspects of how they conduct the elections to limit and to make that playing field more level? And so it is a complicated question to to answer in terms of how to fix the problem, but certainly we have been clear that we do see that that's an issue. And again, the key to this is, are you going to be able to put together a democracy in which people can have faith and in which people can ensure that they can hold their leaders accountable? And when you do this collection of things, and when you address them in this new parliament and with this new government, just some clarity, bright lines instead of blurry lines that tell us what and how is an appropriate conduct versus inappropriate conduct, I think that would be very, very valuable. So we've identified the issue. We can and will make some suggestions as we are requested to do, if we are requested to do so. And then it'll be up again to a Guyanese solution to figure out how to address the issue.
Dennis Shabal, Waves, Mr. Carter or Mr. Calder, could you say whether your mission found any irregularities in terms of exploiting what is termed the bloated voters list? And secondly, what do you think the fact that now Guyana is regarded largely as a petrostate means for the democracy, based on your observations? And thirdly, based on your global experience around the world with respect to observing elections, what suggestions or recommendations do you have in the creation of a credible independent civil society movement to push forward some of these recommendations that you referred to?
So you've asked all the questions, very important ones. Let me take first what we call the list. This is an issue that we have been confronting in Guyana for years. Every election, there's a persistent complaint about the list. One of the things that we would recommend now is, we believe the first thing that should be done, there is a current law that permits and provides a system for removing dead people from the list. That, we think, will go a long way towards addressing the issues that are there. The other issues that are there are more complicated. We do believe there are international best practices for ensuring that you can remove people who've died outside Guyana from the list. And so once we begin that process, for example, that's another aspect of what can happen. There's other ways, and you'll see them in the report, that you can help verify the accuracy of the list in a number of ways. And so we would encourage all of those things to address this persistent problem. To answer a bit of your question about oil, we know that resources are not the issue. So we've got the resources to address many of these problems. With respect to civil society, I'm gonna, and the impact of this sort of newfound wealth and the new revenue streams in this country, I mentioned it at the beginning. Guyana is positioned to be a global leader in how a democracy can develop rapidly, fairly, and in a really truly free way. But it is going to require investment in the institutions that you described with respect to civil society. The Carter Center essentially is a civil society organization. We like to think of ourselves as a global civil society organization because we've been in many countries and done many things, but they can be crucial for democracy. I'm going to let Jason address the rest of your questions there. Sure.
Did you find any evidence that the list was manipulated?
Oh, we did not find any evidence that the list was manipulated. The answer to that question is no. We did not find any evidence that the list was manipulated. There is, of course, just looking at the numbers, you know that there are people who could come off of that list because they don't exist, probably, because they've passed away. And so that is an issue that we think you should start there. That'll go a long way towards addressing some of the persistent concerns with the list. Jason called or talked briefly about civil society and what's been happening in Guyana over the many years that the Carter Center has been here and the impact of oil.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Dennis, for the question. I think what we'd say in response to that is that democracy is not just about elections. Democracy is what happens in between those elections. And we know from experience around the world, and as international observers, we come in for elections, and then very often we leave. International observation is getting better about coming back, providing your recommendations, following up on them. As Jason says, it's ultimately the responsibility of the people of Guyana and its political leaders, and civil society has an absolutely critical role. It's challenging for civil society to organize well and get the leverage that it needs to move political parties to take up some of these issues, but it can be done. And we see three issues really that are probably the most important as the in-between issues. The first one is access to public information. And we mentioned this in our pre-election report. It's very challenging for civil society organizations and activists to get the access to the kind of public information that they need. The access to information system is not functioning well. It's been a long-standing issue that's been mentioned in human rights reports. We've heard the government, the incumbent, indicate that this is something that they want to address, and we'd really like to see that. The second one is around campaign finance, very weak campaign finance laws. With the kind of money coming into Guyana, it's absolutely critical to strengthen that. And the third one of these questions around level playing field. And as Jason said, Guyana gets to make the decision on where to draw that line. There are international standards you can look at, but right now the law is silent on these issues. And of course, the president needs his security, and the president needs, will travel in a state vehicle very often, but there's a lot more to this issue than simply that. And we think if we can see progress, if Guyana can see progress on those issues in between elections, you're going to have a much stronger democracy. The thing you're always afraid out when we give too much attention to elections is that you have a hollowing out of democracy in between. And we don't want that for Guyana. Everybody knows how long the Carter Center has been engaged in this country, such an important place to Jason's grandfather. And we'll continue to be a partner for Guyana as you embrace these challenges. But it's really Guyanese that need to take the lead. So appreciate that.
All right, Mr. Carter, my last question. You made reference to Guyana's constitution, which has provisions for Commonwealth voters. But just to bring to your attention, Article 159 of Guyana's constitution has that provision as well. But in this case, it's questionable of the legal status of these Commonwealth voters. Do you think that would have any impact on the delivery of free and fair elections in Guyana, given that these persons who would have voted are allegedly not legal in the country?
Yeah, the key word there is allegedly, right? The key word there is allegedly. If that's proven, then there are consequences under Guyanese law. And so the key to those types of, there's an individual issue here, an individual issue there. The key there is to investigate those issues as you are doing, to raise the questions as you are doing, and then to ensure that the law is followed. And again, there are very strict and very punitive laws that address improper action with respect to an election. And so I would expect the Guyanese authorities to investigate and to determine what they can determine based on the facts and the evidence that's associated with the individuals that I understand you to be talking about. So that's the key there. Any more? Sure.
Hello, Jason. I want to say that I've known your grandfather for a very long time because I've been covering the elections in Ghana here since 1997, and we really miss President Carter. My question is, we had a presidential candidate here who is sanctioned by the U.S. Now, it seems that he's going to be the new opposition leader, according to the polls. How Carter Center will have some response on that?
First of all, thank you for the kind words about my grandfather. Obviously, one of the things that has been heartening for me is how many people in this country have come to me and tell me that my grandfather meant something to them. I will say this country really meant something to him. This was one of the very first elections that he ever observed, and it was the last that he ever observed, was the election in 2015 in Guyana. So this place is important to my family. It's important to my grandfather in particular, and thank you for remembering him today. With respect to the sanctioned individual and the specific question that you asked, Number one, as I mentioned before, the Carter Center is not the U.S. government. In fact, we take zero funding from the U.S. government at this point. So we don't have anything to do really with that. But what I understand to be, used to be saying, number one, of course, we're waiting for the final results to shake out, to determine the makeup of the parliament. But I understand that this is not the first time that this type of thing has happened. There are policies and procedures that the U.S. government has in place that can understand how to do this. And so we'll leave that to them. In fact, we welcome the ambassador from the United States here, and I know she's answered this question and will continue to do so. But I think we'll wait and see, but I understand that there's a process in place that can be used to address it.
With your experience, the last 2020 elections, with your experience, the last 2020 elections, what went on there, and now the 2025 elections, how you compare GCOM work?
I'm going to let Jason, who has the long history here, answer that specifically. But I will say this: we have been very detailed in our both preliminary statements that we've issued after elections in 2010, in 2015, and in many other elections. So we're on the record describing with great particularity. I will say this: we have always been impressed with GCOM's workers, the poll workers that show up in the villages and work all day and then tabulate all through the night. I mean, folks are not sleeping. They're up there doing their job as best they can. There's a level of professionalism that is really real. And I think we've seen that in all of these elections. The specific comparisons from one to the next, it's complicated because they occur in different scenarios and at different times. It is, and you can see it from our reports that we've assessed them differently at different times. But let me say this, and I think this is, well, do you want to add anything to that? Yeah. So thank you for the question. One more. And if there's no more questions, okay. If there's no more questions, then I assume he'll have one.
I want to go back to the question that one of my colleagues asked, but from a slightly different perspective. To what extent do you believe that both incumbency and access to wealth had anything to do with what appears to be the emerging outcome of the elections? Wealth on the one hand in relation to Mr. Mohammed, and incumbency on the other hand in relation to the PPP.
Look, you all, I said we're not an American organization, but I live in America, right? I live in the state of Georgia, and I've run for office before, and I've served in my state senate. Incumbency matters in every democracy. Wealth now matters in every democracy. The question is how much and what do you do about it to make sure that you still have an accountable government system, right? Democracy has ways that every democracy struggles with. We have struggles. And so one of them is, what's the impact of wealth? We say Guyana should come up with a good campaign finance system to make sure that it's something that they can live with, that you can live with here in Guyana, and that you can address the issues. And there's many places you can look. Jamaica just adopted a law that CARICOM was discussing the other day, and there are others. The question about what is appropriate state activity and what is campaign activity is something that we struggle with in the United States, but we have specific rules. And the question is, how does Guyana want to write those rules? We are merely saying we really, really need to come up with those rules, to put them in place, and to put them in place now, because as the issues of incumbency and wealth grow exponentially with the new Guyana that is coming, we need to make sure the institutions are there and ready for this influx of new revenues. And so I think that's an excellent question for us to end on. And I know I'm going to let Jason Calder conclude, if he would, by saying a little bit about constitutional reform. Because the other thing that we have coming down the pike, besides making sure that you have access to information, campaign finance reform, and understanding of state activity, is this constitutional reform issues that the Carter Center has been discussing for many, many years. So, Jason, why don't you conclude, and then we appreciate all of you for being here.
Thank you. And maybe Dennis, just a slight additional point, Guyanese have fought for their democracy. And it's a precious thing, and I think most Guyanese know that. There are also a lot of different ways you can lose a democracy, right? And it's not, it sometimes doesn't always look like a dictator taking over or anything like that, right? I mean, it can be the traditions of democracy, the systems of democracy, the software of democracy eroding over time. So that's why we make this point about the need to focus on what democracy means in between elections. As Jason noted, the Carter Center's called for constitutional reform for decades. It's one of those recommendations that you all point out to us doesn't get implemented, but we could not be more pleased that in this last term, the government established a Constitutional Reform Commission. And we would really like to see that commission, if it needs to be reconstituted because you've got a new array of people in the National Assembly, great. Let's do that quickly, and let's start accelerating the process of constitutional reform and considering how we strengthen the electoral institutions, how we make the election system one that Guyanese find more favor with. There are aspects of the system that people have talked about for a long time that they'd like to see changed. Go out to the public, have those conversations, get it done well in advance of the next election. We know what the experience was in 98 to 2001. We left some reforms on the table then. There are aspects of the Constitution that didn't get changed that were actually things that people wanted to see happen. So we'd really like to see that as a top priority, and you have now the resources, which traditionally has always been an issue, but you have the resources now, and you have the structure to do it. And we're really looking forward to see what comes out of that process.
Thank you all very much.
How long are you guys sitting around?